They bound him to the weathered post in the center of the Navajo settlement as the merciless Arizona sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. Sweat streamed down Wyatt Foster's face, stinging his eyes and soaking his torn shirt. 3 Navajo warriors stood before him, Winchester rifles aimed at his chest, their expressions stone-cold with judgment. The gathered tribe shouted accusations in their native tongue words. Wyatt only partially understood, but their meaning was clear enough. Death was coming for him. His wrists burned against the coarse rope as he scanned the hostile faces surrounding him. These were the same people he'd traded with peacefully for over a year. Now they looked at him as if he were a rabid wolf caught in their midst. Through cracked lips, he spoke. "I didn't steal your horses. I didn't set foot on your sacred ground." One of the warriors struck him across the face with the butt of his rifle. Blood trickled from Wyatt's split lip, metallic on his tongue. The crowd parted suddenly. A tall figure emerged, Marcus Stone, his silver-streaked black hair hanging loose over his shoulders, his face a map of deep lines and barely contained fury. In his hand gleamed a hunting knife with an elaborately carved bone handle. "Today," Marcus announced, switching to English for Wyatt's benefit, "we rid ourselves of a thief and a trespasser." He pressed the blade against Wyatt's throat, just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. Wyatt didn't flinch, meeting Marcus's gaze with unflinching defiance. The sound of a gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. "Stop." The crowd turned as one. Sarah Blackhorn stood at the edge of the gathering, a smoking Colt revolver pointed skyward, her raven hair whipping in the sudden desert wind. Her dark eyes burned with a fury that matched Marcus's own. "Step away from him, uncle," she commanded, lowering the pistol until it pointed at Marcus. "This doesn't concern you, niece," Marcus growled. Sarah pushed through the crowd until she stood just feet from Wyatt. "It concerns me more than anyone." She raised her voice to address the entire tribe. "If you kill this man, you must kill me too because he is my husband." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face contorted with shock, then disgust. "Lies!" he hissed, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Sarah reached beneath her deerskin shirt and pulled out a silver chain. Hanging from it was a simple band of twisted silver. "We were married 6 months ago. I wear his ring next to my heart." Her eyes locked with Wyatt's for one breathless moment. "And I will not stand by while you murder him based on false accusations." Marcus recovered quickly, his shock hardening into calculated rage. 3 witnesses saw him near the sacred burial grounds yesterday at sunset. 5 of our finest horses vanished the same night. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded handkerchief. He snapped it open, revealing the embroidered initials, W. "This was found trampled into the earth at the burial site," Marcus declared, his voice rising. "His mark, left carelessly behind." Wyatt stared at the handkerchief in disbelief. It was indeed a gift from Sarah, embroidered by her own hands. But he'd kept it in his saddlebag. "That's impossible," Wyatt said, his voice steady despite the growing dread in his gut. "Yesterday, I was fixing fence lines on the north side of my property. All day, from sunrise until well after dark. An elderly woman stepped forward from the crowd, her face a maze of deep wrinkles, her back slightly bent but her eyes sharp with wisdom. Elizabeth Many Rivers, the oldest living member of the tribe, and a respected voice in all matters of law and tradition. "The girl speaks with conviction," she said in clear English. "And conviction deserves consideration." Marcus scowled. "With respect, elder. This outsider has violated our most sacred laws. He must face judgment." "Thank you for watching." "Judgment, yes," Elizabeth agreed. "But justice requires truth." She studied Wyatt's face with penetrating intensity. "If you are innocent, would you submit to the ancient trials to prove it?" Before Wyatt could respond, Marcus interjected. "The trials are for those worthy of our traditions, not for outsiders who—" "Let him answer," Elizabeth cut him off sharply. Wyatt met the old woman's gaze. "I don't know what these trials are, but if they'll prove my innocence, I'll face them." A hint of approval flickered across Elizabeth's weathered face. 3 trials. each designed to test not just your body, but your character. Inside a small shelter at the edge of the settlement, Sarah's fingers worked quickly at Wyatt's bonds. "How did this happen?" she whispered urgently. "Exactly where I said, fixing fences with Samuel Porter." The ropes fell away, and Wyatt rubbed his raw wrists. "Sarah, someone planted that handkerchief. Someone's framing me." "My uncle," she said without hesitation. 3 days ago, one of his supporters saw us together near the river. Word got back to him. A young man entered Jackson Stone, Marcus's son. Unlike his father, Jackson's expression held no malice, only a conflicted wariness. "I don't have much time," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. "My father will notice I'm gone." "Why are you here, Jackson?" Sarah demanded. "Because this isn't right." Jackson's voice was barely above a whisper. "My father. He found something on the border between our land and your ranch." He looked directly at Wyatt. "Gold. Not just traces a substantial vein." The pieces clicked into place in Wyatt's mind. "So that's what this is about." "He wants my land," Jackson nodded. "He made a deal with the mining company from Tucson. They promised him a percentage if he can secure access." His expression darkened. "When he learned about you and Sarah, it gave him the perfect opportunity. 2 birds with 1 stone, get rid of you and punish her for defying tribal expectations." Jackson reached into his shirt and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a map showing where the horses are being kept, a cave system near the eastern boundary. You'd never find them in time without it." Sarah took the map, her eyes wide with surprise. "Why are you helping us, Jackson?" A flash of pain crossed the young man's face. "My father is willing to sell out our people for gold. He speaks of tradition while betraying everything we stand for." His jaw tightened. "I won't be part of it." The unforgiving desert stretched before Wyatt like a sun-bleached battlefield. Heat shimmered off distant rock formations, distorting the horizon into wavering mirages. He moved swiftly, conserving his water, eyes scanning the ground for signs of passage. Real horse tracks, headed east, not following any established trail, but cutting across the roughest terrain. The first 5 miles passed without incident. Wyatt moved at a steady jog, his cavalry training serving him well despite the years since. The waterskin was already half empty, but he'd spotted a seasonal spring ahead on the map. If it still held water, he'd refill there. The spring was dry. Wyatt stared at the cracked mud where water had once pooled, now baked hard by the relentless Sunday. Another calculation in Marcus's plan. He'd chosen the driest season for this trial, knowing water would be scarce. A distant rattle froze Wyatt in place. Slowly, he turned to see a diamondback coiled on a rock just yards away. Its warning clear. Between Wyatt and his path forward lay one of the deadliest snakes in the territory. With deliberate care, Wyatt reached down and grabbed a stone. The snake's rattle intensified. In one fluid motion, Wyatt hurled the rock, striking the ground beside the serpent. Startled, the diamondback uncoiled and slithered away into the scrub. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A man crouching behind a boulder 50 yards ahead. Rifle in hand. One of Marcus's insurance policies. Using the scattered vegetation as cover, Wyatt began a wide circle around the gunman's position, moving inch by inch when the man's gaze was directed elsewhere. 30 minutes of painstaking progress brought Wyatt within 10 feet of his target, a young Navajo man barely out of his teens, nervously checking his rifle and muttering to himself. Not a hardened killer, but someone pressed into service. Wyatt gathered himself and sprang forward. Before the young man could bring his rifle to bear, Wyatt crashed into him, sending them both tumbling to the ground. The rifle skittered away across the rocks. Within moments, Wyatt had him pinned, knife at his throat. "I don't want to hurt you," Wyatt said, breathing hard. "But I will if I have to." "Who sent you?" "Marcus Stone," the young man gasped. "He paid me to make sure you never reach the caves." "Are there others?" "One more." At the cave entrance. Fear made the young man's voice tremble. "He will kill you. He's not like me, he's done it before." Wyatt released his grip slightly. I'm going to let you go. You have a choice: try to stop me again, and one of us dies. Or go home and forget you saw me. The young man nodded rapidly. I'll go. I never wanted this job. The hidden water source the young guard mentioned saved Wyatt's life. He drank deeply and refilled his water skin. The sun touched the western horizon as he approached the foothills, bathing the landscape in blood-red light. According to the map, the caves were less than 2 miles ahead, but so was Marcus's second guard, one who wouldn't hesitate to kill. The cave entrance came into view, a dark gash in the cliff face with a small plateau before it. A grizzled warrior sat beside a small fire, rifle across his knees, facing the approach Wyatt would need to take. Carefully, Wyatt worked his way around to a position above and behind the cave entrance, a treacherous climb in the darkness. When he reached a ledge 30 feet above the plateau, he struck his knife against a stone, creating sparks that caught a dry brush bundle. It flared to life, casting wild shadows across the cliff face. The guard leapt to his feet, rifle raised toward the unexpected light. In that moment of distraction, Wyatt hurled the burning bundle far to the right of the cave entrance. It landed in a patch of dry brush which ignited immediately, creating a larger blaze. As the guard turned to face this new threat, Wyatt launched himself from the ledge, landing heavily on the man's shoulders. They crashed to the ground, the rifle discharging harmlessly into the night sky. The guard's hand closed around a knife at his belt. Wyatt caught his wrist, but the blade inched closer to his throat. With a desperate surge, Wyatt slammed his forehead into the guard's face. Cartilage cracked as the man's nose shattered. The knife wavered. Wyatt struck again, his fist connecting with the guard's temple. The man went limp beneath him. Inside the cave, 5 horses stamped nervously, disturbed by the commotion and the smell of smoke. Among them, Wyatt recognized the distinctive gray stallion that had been the pride of the Navajo herd. As Wyatt approached to untie them, his foot struck something half buried in the dirt floor of the cave. He knelt, brushing away soil to reveal a freshly made mining test pit. Jackson had been telling the truth. Glinting in the dim light from the fire outside were unmistakable veins of gold-bearing quartz. Wyatt pocketed a sample as evidence, then turned his attention to the horses. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn wasn't far off. 15 miles back to the settlement, with perhaps 3 hours until sunrise. Impossible by foot. But not if he rode. The settlement came into view just as the sun's first rays spilled over the mountains. Waiting at the eastern edge were Elizabeth, Many Rivers, Marcus Stone, and a crowd of tribal members. Sarah stood apart, her face tight with worry that dissolved into relief when she spotted Wyatt approaching with the 5 horses. Marcus's expression darkened with barely contained fury as Wyatt dismounted before them, the gray stallion blowing heavily behind him. The horses, as promised, Wyatt said, his voice rough from thirst and exhaustion. All 5 returned before sunrise. Elizabeth stepped forward, inspecting each animal carefully. The first trial is completed successfully, she announced. The second trial will commence at midday, Elizabeth declared. You have 3 hours to rest and prepare. Guards escorted Wyatt to the same shelter as before. This time, Sarah was waiting with water, food, and a worried expression. You made it, she whispered, as she helped him clean the cut on his arm. I was so afraid. Your cousin's map helped, Wyatt said quietly. And I found something else. He showed her the gold-bearing quartz. Your uncle has been planning this for some time. Before Sarah could respond, shouting erupted outside. The shelter flap was thrown open, and Jackson Stone stumbled in, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. My father knows I helped you, he gasped. One of his men followed me yesterday. They found the map I made. What happened? Sarah pressed a cloth to his wound. He attacked me himself, Jackson said, his voice bitter. Said I betrayed the tribe by helping an outsider. His eyes met Wyatt's. You need to know he's changing the second trial. Instead of questions about our traditions, he's forcing the council to approve a trial by fire. What does that mean? Wyatt demanded. There's a cave system beneath the sacred mesa, Jackson explained. A series of narrow tunnels with natural gas vents that can ignite. Tribal warriors once used it as a test of courage, navigating through darkness and flames to retrieve a sacred object from the central chamber. A cold weight settled in Wyatt's stomach. Marcus had done his research well. The burning farmhouse in Tennessee had been 15 years ago, but the nightmares still came. Sometimes the screams of men he couldn't save, the searing heat on his skin as he dragged himself through flames to safety. The entire tribe seemed to be making the mile-long procession to the mesa, a flat-topped hill rising dramatically from the desert floor. At its base, a narrow opening led into darkness. "Wyatt Foster," Elizabeth announced formally. "Your second trial has been set by the council. You must enter the Cave of Fire and retrieve the sacred eagle feather headdress from the central chamber." "I accept the trial," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. As Wyatt took the torch, Sarah stepped forward, removing something from around her neck, a small leather pouch on a cord. "This contains sacred herbs," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Protection against evil spirits. It is my right to offer it to the one facing trial." Elizabeth nodded permission. Sarah slipped the cord over Wyatt's head. As she did, she whispered urgently in his ear, "The left passage at every junction. Always left. Trust me." The temperature dropped immediately as the passage narrowed, forcing him to crouch. His torch cast wild shadows on the limestone walls. The smell of sulfur grew stronger with each step. The passage split. Without hesitation, Wyatt took the left fork, remembering Sarah's whispered instruction. The ceiling lowered further, forcing him to crawl in places, the rough stones scraping his back. A flicker of blue flame erupted from a crack in the floor ahead, natural gas igniting spontaneously. Wyatt froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The farmhouse in Tennessee flooded back into his mind, the heat, the screams, the terrible certainty of death closing in. Another gas vent flared, closer this time. Then another. Soon a line of blue flames danced across the passage floor, blocking his path forward. "I can't do this," whispered a voice in his mind. "I'll die here, just like Marcus planned." An image of Sarah's face pushed through his fear. She believed he could do this. She had risked everything for him. Wyatt forced himself to move, one agonizing step at a time, past the first line of flames. The heat singed his pants leg, but he pressed on. Another junction left again. The torch went out. Total darkness enveloped him. The torch had been sabotaged, the head soaked in something that prevented it from relighting. Another of Marcus's precautions. A faint glow appeared ahead, blue-green and ghostly. As Wyatt approached, he realized it was foxfire, a natural luminescence growing on the cave walls. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make out the basic shape of the passage. The central chamber opened before him, a vast cavern with a high ceiling. Natural skylights far overhead allowed beams of sunlight to penetrate, illuminating a raised stone altar at the center. Upon it rested the sacred eagle feather headdress. As Wyatt approached the altar, movement caught his eye. He wasn't alone in the chamber. A figure emerged from the shadows, one of Marcus's men, a knife gleaming in his hand. "Marcus said you might make it this far," the man said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "I'm here to make sure you go no further." Wyatt assessed his opponent, younger, stronger, armed with more than just a knife. A rifle leaned against the wall behind him, but there was uncertainty in the young man's eyes. "Your name?" Wyatt asked, playing for time. "Daniel Redhawk." "Well, Daniel, you have a choice to make. Either you kill an innocent man on the orders of a tribal elder who's planning to sell your sacred land to mining interests, or you step aside and let justice prevail." Confusion crossed Daniel's face. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Stone has discovered gold beneath your tribal lands," Wyatt said, watching the young man carefully. "He's made arrangements with mining companies from Tucson to exploit it for his own profit." "You're lying," Daniel insisted, but doubt had crept into his voice. "There's a test pit in the cave where the horses were hidden," Wyatt continued. "I found it last night. Go see for yourself when this is over." For a long moment, Daniel stood frozen in indecision. Then, slowly, he lowered his knife. "Take the headdress," he said quietly. "But know this, if you're lying about Marcus, I'll hunt you down myself." Daylight beckoned ahead as Wyatt emerged from the cave entrance, the sacred headdress clutched carefully in his hands. The gathered tribe fell silent at the sight of him, soot-streaked, bleeding from numerous scrapes, but alive and successful. Marcus's face contorted in disbelief, then rage. "Impossible," he hissed. "No outsider could navigate the Cave of Fire alone." Wyatt stepped forward and placed the headdress in Elizabeth Many Rivers' outstretched hands. "The second trial is complete," he declared. "And now it's time for some truth." Before Marcus could react, Wyatt pulled out the gold-bearing quartz and held it high for all to see. "This came from a test pit in the cave where your stolen horses were hidden, Marcus. A mining test pit, fresh dug and professionally shored up." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face drained of color. "Lies," he sputtered, but his eyes darted nervously to the tribal elders. "Then explain this." Jackson stepped forward, holding a folded document. "I found this in your personal chest, a preliminary contract with the Arizona Mining Association, signed by you 3 months ago, granting them exploration rights to tribal lands in exchange for a 20% share of all profits." The murmur became a roar of outrage. Marcus lunged for his son, but 2 warriors intercepted him, holding him back. "The third trial," Marcus shouted desperately. "He must still face the third trial." Elizabeth Many Rivers raised her hand for silence. When the crowd quieted, she turned to Marcus, her ancient eyes hard with judgment. "There will be a third trial," she declared. "But not for Wyatt Foster." Her gaze swept over the assembled tribe. "Marcus Stone stands accused of betraying his people for personal gain. He will face the council's judgment at sunset." The western sky blazed crimson as the tribal council gathered for Marcus Stone's judgment. 14 elders sat in a semicircle, their faces solemn in the fading light. The entire tribe had assembled to witness justice. Before the judgment could begin, a commotion erupted at the edge of the gathering. A group of men pushed their way forward, 8 rough-looking whites led by a tall man in an expensive suit. Behind them came Daniel Redhawk, his face twisted with anger. "I found them at the eastern boundary," Daniel announced. "Armed men from the mining company, with papers signed by Marcus Stone, granting them access to our land." The suited man stepped forward, seemingly oblivious to the tension surrounding him. "I'm Harold Winslow, representing Arizona Mining Association. We have a legally binding agreement with Mr. Stone here." He held up a document. "We're prepared to begin preliminary excavation immediately." A deadly silence fell over the gathering. Elizabeth Many Rivers fixed the mining representative with a withering stare. "Your agreement is with one man, not the Navajo Nation. It has no legal standing here or in any white man's court." Her voice was ice. "You will leave our lands immediately." Winslow's expression hardened. He turned to the rough men behind him. "Gentlemen, it seems we need to make a more forceful case for our investment." As if on cue, the miners drew revolvers and rifles. The Navajo warriors reached for their own weapons, but they were outnumbered in firearms. In the moment of shocked silence that followed, Marcus made his move. With a sudden jerk, he broke free from the distracted warriors holding him, rushing toward Winslow and his armed men. "The agreement stands," Marcus shouted. "These men have legal right to the gold." Wyatt stepped forward, placing himself between the miners and the tribe. "That's not how it works, Winslow. This is sovereign tribal land. Your agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on." Winslow studied Wyatt with cold calculation. "And who might you be?" "Wyatt Foster, former U.S. Cavalry, current neighbor to these good people." Wyatt's voice was steady, his stance relaxed but ready. "And I strongly suggest you and your men leave peacefully while that option remains available." One of the miners, a scarred man with a patchy beard, laughed harshly. "Look around, mister. 9 of us, all armed. How many bullets you think you can take before you hit the ground?" "Enough to make sure you join me there," Wyatt replied evenly. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. Behind Wyatt, the tribal warriors had begun to spread out, moving to flank the miners. They might be outgunned, but they would not be outfought on their own land. Winslow raised his hand, signaling his men to hold. A strategic withdrawal might be prudent while we consult our legal team, but Marcus Stone had seen his last chance slipping away. With a roar of rage, he lunged forward and grabbed a revolver from one of the miners. Before anyone could react, he aimed it at Wyatt. "You ruined everything!" he screamed. The gunshot cracked across the gathering like thunder. Wyatt felt the bullet pass inches from his head. He dove for cover. As more shots rang out, the miners taking advantage of the chaos to open fire, Sarah appeared beside him, pressing a revolver into his hand. "My father's," she explained breathlessly. "I kept it hidden." Through the chaos, Wyatt spotted Marcus taking cover with Winslow behind an overturned wagon. The mining representative looked furious, shouting at Marcus as gunfire continued to exchange around them. "We need to end this before more people get hurt," Wyatt said to Sarah. "Your people are outgunned." Jackson grabbed a torch from the council fire and hurled it onto the canvas covering of the miner's wagon. The dry material caught immediately, sending flames leaping skyward. In the confusion that followed, Wyatt and Sarah circled wide around the firefight. They reached a position behind the miners, just as Winslow was organizing a retreat. "Fall back to the horses," the mining representative ordered. "This is a lost cause." Marcus grabbed his arm. "We can still salvage this. Kill the tribal elders and enough warriors. The rest will submit." Winslow stared at him in disgust. "You're insane, Stone. Stand where you are." Wyatt's voice cut through their argument. Both men turned to find Wyatt's revolver aimed steadily at Winslow's chest. Sarah beside him with a drawn bow. "Order your men to lay down their weapons," Wyatt continued. "Or you won't live to see morning." Winslow hesitated, calculating his odds. Around them, the gunfire had begun to slacken as miners realized their leader was captured. "Do it," Winslow finally called out. "Drop your weapons." One by one, the miners complied, raising their hands in surrender. All except Marcus Stone. With a howl of defiance, he raised his stolen revolver and fired at Wyatt. The bullet struck Wyatt in the shoulder, spinning him half around. Pain exploded through his body, but he kept his grip on his own weapon. Through a haze of agony, he saw Sarah loose her arrow, striking Marcus in the leg. The tribal elder fell, cursing. Wyatt steadied himself and approached the fallen man. Marcus glared up at him, hatred burning in his eyes. "Finish it," he spat. "Kill me. It's what you've wanted all along." Wyatt studied him for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "That's the difference between us, Marcus. I never wanted anyone dead." He turned away, the revolver lowered. Behind him, Marcus staggered to his feet, pulling a knife from his boot. Sarah's warning shout came too late as the older man lunged forward, blade aimed at Wyatt's back. A single shot rang out. Marcus stopped mid-stride, a look of confusion crossing his face. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then back up at his shooter. Jackson Stone lowered his rifle, his face a mask of grief and resolution. "I'm sorry, Father," he said quietly. "But I couldn't let you become a murderer too." Marcus collapsed to his knees, then toppled sideways into the dust. By the time Elizabeth Many Rivers reached him, he was gone. A month later, Wyatt sat on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. His shoulder had healed well, though it still ached when rain was coming. Sarah moved quietly behind him, placing a cup of coffee at his elbow. "Jackson's message arrived," she said, settling beside him. "The tribal council has approved your appointment as liaison to the territorial governor." Wyatt nodded, taking her hand in his. After Marcus's death and the miners' retreat, Marshal Evans had indeed offered Wyatt the position as official intermediary between the Navajo and the territorial government. With the discovery of gold on tribal lands now public knowledge, someone trusted by both sides was needed more than ever. "It won't be easy," Sarah said, echoing his thoughts. "There will be more mining companies, more pressure on the tribe to sell, but this time they'll face it with full knowledge and proper legal protection." Wyatt replied. No more backroom deals. In the distance, riders approached Jackson Stone at the head of a small group of Navajo warriors. As the new voice of the tribal council, Jackson had embraced a more progressive role than his father, while still honoring their traditions. Riders coming, Sarah observed, rising to her feet. I see them. Wyatt stood as well, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wound. The distance between their two worlds was small, barely 3 miles separated Wyatt's ranch from the Navajo settlement. But the gap they had bridged was far greater than mere physical space. Their marriage, once a secret that could have cost them both everything, was now a symbol of what was possible when understanding replaced suspicion. Jackson dismounted at the edge of the yard, approaching with a solemn expression that immediately put Wyatt on alert. What's happened? Wyatt asked. Winslow is back, Jackson said grimly. With 20 armed men and papers from the territorial capital, claiming mining rights to the gold deposits. Sarah's hand tightened on Wyatt's arm. That's impossible, the governor assured us. The governor has been overruled by mining interests in Washington, Jackson cut in. They're claiming national necessity for the gold reserves. Wyatt felt cold anger building in his chest. The story wasn't over yet, perhaps it never would be, as long as gold lay beneath the earth and men valued wealth over honor. When do they arrive? He asked. Tomorrow at noon. They sent a messenger ahead to avoid any unfortunate misunderstandings. Jackson's bitter tone made clear what he thought of such courtesy. Wyatt nodded slowly, his mind already mapping out the confrontation to come. Then we have until noon to prepare. Send riders to Marshal Evans. Get word to every ranch and homestead within 20 miles. His eyes met Sarah's. This isn't just a Navajo problem anymore. If they can seize tribal lands today, they'll come for our ranches tomorrow. Sarah smiled, a fierce expression that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her. Spoken like a true liaison, as Jackson rode off to spread the word. Wyatt and Sarah stood together on their porch, watching the last light fade from the western sky. Whatever came with the dawn, they would face it together, bound by blood and honor on the frontier where two worlds met.